building. My friend Joel's business. It's total loss.
Hello, I'm Tim Bardwell, and welcome to the Face of Appalachia. When I was a boy, we lived in the small mountain town of Marshall in Madison County, North Carolina. It sits on a narrow strip of land between a steep mountain and the French Broad River. My parents were school teachers there, and my dad coached at the high school. In the 1980s, my mother remarried, and her husband, Ernest Teague, owned a large milling company across from the train depot. Marshall has always been one of my favorite towns and holds a special place in my heart. Over the past few years, it has gone through somewhat of a renaissance. In one day, that was all washed away. In this episode, we'll talk to my longtime friend Josh Copus, who runs the Old Marshall Jail Hotel and Zadie's restaurant, about his first-hand experience during the storm. He was in town on Friday morning preparing for the flooding. By 9:30, the water was over the railroad tracks next to his business, and by noon, there was a river flowing down Main Street. The water continued to rise before cresting at 27 feet around 8 o'clock Friday night, surpassing the levels of the historic 1916 flood, which has always been the benchmark to compare flooding in our area. By Saturday afternoon, the water had gone down enough for folks to get into town to survey the damage, and on Sunday, the cleanup efforts began, even before the waters had fully receded from the streets. This recovery process is going to be long and difficult. If you're interested, there is information at the end of the video on how you can help these resilient folk.
I'm Josh Copus. I'm the owner of the Old Marshall Jail Hotel and Zadie's restaurant here in downtown Marshall. So we had a flood. The crest in Marshall on Friday was 27 feet here. And so for historical reference, the 1916 flood is the biggest flood in the history of this region. The USGA number on that is 22 feet, but our number here in Marshall that we use is 23.9. That's the number that's passed down from the folks that lived through it. And so our crest for this flood, the Helene hurricane, was 27 feet. So that'll give you a good visual representation of just how much more water this was than the 1916 flood. The lore of the 1916 flood is that it went to the 5th step of the courthouse, and this flood went 2.5 feet into the courthouse. So I was here Friday morning. We were preparing for 19 feet, which is, basically knee high, which is a bad flood. The water hasn't come over the railroad tracks here since 77. I lived through the 2004 flood, which we thought was a big deal, felt like a pretty big deal. We've always known that Marshall would flood. It was never a matter of if, it was always a matter of when. So when the first projection we got, which was 15.5 feet, which is pretty similar to 04, which the town will flood, but we're not at 15.5. We're not even getting water here at the jail. Then it went to 19, which is a pretty real flood. And at that point, we mobilized sandbagging doors. I raised all the equipment in my building up on Thursday, thinking that it wasn't even going to come in the windows. And then Friday morning, there was a group of us that were down here still doing storm prep. And at 9:30, the water started coming over the tracks here at the jail. And then in an hour, we lost the whole town. It was that fast. By 10:30, there was water, just a river on Main Street. I was here till about noon, 12:30 on Friday on the courthouse steps. it was already about to the second or third step, and I had a safe evacuation plan around the back of the courthouse. My truck was up on Hill Street, but at 12:30 there was 5 feet of water down Main Street, and I watched all the windows in Zuma just shatter, and then the whole restaurant just floated down the street like one chair at a time. And that was like as much as I could handle, like in that moment. That's when I left. That was like too, like emotionally too much. Like at that point, you just, you know, I felt like we lost the town. I came back here at 6 p.m. on Friday, and there was a small group of us that were watching it from the Marshall house. And the crest was 8 p.m. that evening. And at that point, you know, you could see, we already knew the whole south end of town was gone. And just, you could see the height of the water from up on the hill, and I knew that it was terrible, the worst ever. And just the most dejected destruction. It was like emotionally, you're in shock. And then you're just like, there's no way that we can come back from this. I got into the town on Saturday at like 4 p.m. That was the weirdest day. There was a couple folks that were kind of coming down in here. This was still water, but it had receded to the point where, you know, you could get in. So I got into the jail for the first time at about 4 p.m. on Saturday, and that's when I like just saw it. And the water went to the ceiling. It almost went to the second floor. We had 13 feet of water in this building, and everything just picked up and then put back down, but just put back down all wrong. So, I mean, all my equipment, coolers, floating around in other rooms, you know, just crazy stuff. This is coming down the stairs from the hotel. Was my restaurant. It's gone now. We were fortunate. There was kind of like an eddy here. So this building, our building is okay. It's structurally fine. We didn't have the bad debris flow that the south end of town, which is like the tip of the spear, and those buildings went like, you know, the depot, the whole thing floated down Main Street and then shattered into a billion pieces. Those buildings were getting hammered by, I mean, I saw things float down the river that were like cars and fuel tanks the size of houses, and just like, you know, trees that probably weighed 15,000 pounds. Just so our windows didn't even shatter, which is pretty incredible, but not everyone was as fortunate. I mean, basically every storefront on Main Street was destroyed. So it's a lot. Yeah, when I came here on Saturday, I felt like it was over. Just the destruction was so massive and so complete, and you just like I'm an extremely optimistic person, but my first reaction was like, this town's done. I felt like it was gone. I don't know, like, do you just condemn a whole town? Like, that's honestly where my head was. I was trying to be like a good soldier and keep the morale up, but internally, I was broken. I was shattered. It just seemed like too much. And I think what happened for me was Sunday, I remember waking up and just not knowing how to be or what to do or how to live or how to act. Like, when you have an experience like that, it's almost like you're floating outside of your physical body, and everything that you've known or considered to be true feels like it's all questionable and on the table. And I just didn't know what to do, and no one had communication, so there was no cell phone service, and I was just like, I'm just gonna go to the town. I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know what it's gonna be like when I get there, but like, that's the only thing I can think to do. And when I got here on Sunday, we were already here. People were here. People were already starting. People that I know that lost more than I did had a better attitude than I did, and I was like, okay, you got to change how you're thinking about things, Josh, and reset your brain. And what it was we didn't wait for anyone to come and save us. We just started immediately. And I think that's what saved the town. Not just the physical town, because we've always known that like the buildings are not what makes this place, it's the people. And we were all going through something that was like, we didn't even need to talk about it. Like, that's what I remember being really powerful, was like, people were like, I don't know what to say. And I was like, dude, we don't have to say anything. Like, you don't need to talk, because I'm going through what you're going through. And like, you just look at someone and there's a knowing, there's an understanding, and like, talking wasn't gonna help. Working helped. Doing something helped. I feel like because we started, that's what gave me the strength to do it. Like, if I had to wait a week, like if someone told me that I couldn't come down here and just get started, like this town would have been over. And I think for us, like, just getting going, like I was like, bring your tractor. We started with shovels and wheelbarrows, and then we had tractors and skid steers and dump trucks, and it was a civilian-led effort. The first week was the best. It was the best.
We thought we'd share some scenes of Marshall from before Hurricane Helene to show you what everyday life was like before the storm. While it'll be a long, slow recovery, our hope is that Marshall will return to and even surpass his former glory. In upcoming episodes, we'll continue to document the rebuilding process and talk with other residents and business owners about their experiences and the challenges they face. Those interested in helping in the recovery efforts of Marshall businesses and residents can visit helpmarshall.org, which has a directory of those in need and links to individual GoFundMe pages. We hope you will find a way to help these people that we know and love. On this channel, I hope to continue to honor the people, vibrant culture, and strong traditions of Appalachia. If you share my interest in the people and places I call home, be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to learn more about this way of life. The black and white photographs in our videos are taken from my 3 Appalachian-themed books, which are available online. You can find us at thefaceofappalachia.com and barnwellphoto.com and on Instagram at Tim Barnwell Photography. Thanks for stopping by. Hope to see you again soon.